What are you recommending to us today?
Well, I'm recommending that you stay off Twitter, but I'm also recommending a great film that I watched last night um, from Jules Dassin, of all people, the wonderful director of The Naked City and Rafifi. Um, and it's a film called Uptight from 1968.
I've not
And
heard of this movie.
it is a remake of John Ford's The Informer,
Is
set
that the
in Cleveland, Ohio. And
wait? The Informer. That's the Victor McLaglen
yeah,
film.
your mother forgives me, Johnny. And,
Yeah, Francis, your mother forgives me.
Yeah. Well, in
That scene plays in The Departed in one scene.
I know.
The minstrel boy to the war is gone in the rains of death.
Why are you singing?
Find
We've
him.
talked about you singing on the podcast.
Sorry, just because there's a scene in the movie where he's playing the minstrel boy.
What movie?
The Informer.
Well, I'm talking about. I'm not in this film, which is not The Informer, which is a remake of The Informer.
It takes place in Cleveland.
It takes place in Cleveland, and it takes place among black militants. Essentially,
Interesting.
A version of like what would become the Black Panthers, or what was the Black Panthers, and a guy who has been involved with them, whose name is Tank. He played by the brilliant Julian Mayfield. He is the Victor McLaglen character, and he's this. He's got a drinking problem. He's, I think, there's implied has some serious kind of other issues, like mental health issues potentially.
Cool.
And he betrays his friend who is fighting for, who's choosing the course of violence over non-violence against against white repression. And
so violent extremists, not violent. Not
well, like, just like a militant, he's the guy is the guy first gets in trouble because he's stealing weapons for this group. But it's like, what is extreme? I mean, this is what I think is really great is the way this film engages with the debate that was being had in this moment about non-violence versus violence in the struggle against white supremacy. So but before we get to that, I think the thing that's really, really interesting about this film is that it comes out in 1968, only months after Martin Luther King was murdered in Memphis, Tennessee. Yeah. And the first shots of the film are color footage from King's funeral.
Really?
Actual footage, taken by Dassin. And it is really powerful the way it grounds this, because everyone in the film is engaged in this discussion, and you can see so much of the feeling of the time in the performances of the actors. And these are actors that include, as I mentioned, Julian Mayfield, but also Ruby Dee.
I love Ruby Dee. She's amazing.
Oh, it's brilliant actress, and also a great figure on the left, an activist, civil rights activist, but left wing. And there's a lot of leftist politics in this, and it's great what it adds to it. And obviously Dassin himself had been blacklisted for being a communist, and had gone to Europe to make Rafifi and other films. And this is such a return, and I think his experience of the blacklist also informs this movie. So it's just such a document of a time and of a place, and it just feels so amazing that they actually got this film out in that year. The people who everyone involved in it, it feels like such a team effort to really get this done. And it's a great film. It's obviously done on a budget, but the way they use the location is perfect. There's some really inventive cinematography. There's a bit that takes place in a fun house, which you have to kind of see to believe. It's so good and very funny. But the sadness and pathos in Julian Mayfield's performance is just incredible, and Ruby Dee is amazing. You've also got a great performance from Raymond St. Jacques and Juanita Moore, and lots of others. And there's you get some great acknowledgements of realities in this film, as well as there being this really important discussion that goes through the entire film about how to fight for Black liberation and what methods you should use in that fight. There's also a depiction of an openly gay character. There's also just a real sort of trying to grapple with alcoholism, or poor decision making, and the desire to what does it mean for a black man to give up his own kind. And this question of which is now that we've just seen coming out this year, Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah, because I was thinking a little bit about that film, and
it's engaging very much in that dynamic, of what the people who commit this act of betrayal against their own race, who betray that solidarity. And so there's just so much wonderful stuff going on in this film politically and from a sort of historical standpoint, but at the same time there's just real beauty and greatness in the filmmaking. The title sequence is brilliantly animated by these I can't remember their names, but these wonderful animators, and the credit sequence even, and then the soundtrack is done entirely by Booker T and the MGs. So it's just like it's such a quality.
I like Booker T and the MGs.
Yeah. It's just a quality picture, and
it sounds really very different. I mean, in terms of style from the John Ford movie, but even though it does follow the same sort of plot, but with a bit more of a bit, but with a bit, like you said, a bit more of a grounded political.
I will say
context.
because Dassin directs it, and he comes from the classic era of cinema, and because he's aware of The Informant, there are bits which feel similar. There's some expressionist touches in this film that echoed, I think, The Informer, and there's real poetry in the main character, this doomed and fatally flawed man, that really echoes John Ford. And I think some of the sensitivity in it is very Fordian, but it's its own thing. It's not blaxploitation. I wouldn't call it that, but it is an absolutely majority black cast. And white people, when they appear, are either sort of peripheral or ridiculous. And it really centers the story on the black experience. So it's similar to other films that are directed by white directors, but handle, the characters, African American characters with real care and grace. I'm thinking like Martin Ritt for Sounder, or John Sayles in Brother from Another Planet. So I'd say it's because it's not made by black people for black people per se. I wouldn't call it blaxploitation, but it's certainly contributing to what's going to start to happen in the 70s. But I think it's a film that should be sought out and consumed. I think it's one of the great forgotten American movies, and really, really topical right now, as it will continue and will have been, since it came out, and will continue to be because of the situation in this country.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things were going on in America in 1968, not just Martin Luther King, but Robert Kennedy and what was going on in Vietnam. There was like a big, terrible year for what was going on.
Yeah, and this film specifically is engaging with what happened to King and how and what that the feelings that created. But it does touch on Vietnam, and it touches, I think, on even on Bobby Kennedy. I'm not quite sure.
Was the Chicago 7 trial that was going on at this time as well?
Yeah. But again, this film's province, I think, is really just focusing on that impact of what the murder of Dr. King meant.
But I also think what happened with Fred Hampton, I think that also happened around the same time in 1968. So
I think it might have been a year later.
Okay.
I think it was 16. I'm not sure exactly when Hampton was murdered.
I don't know too much about the story. I mean, I know what happened to him, but I don't really know what led up. I mean, I really want to watch Judas and the Black Messiah. I've only heard nothing but great things about it. But yeah, I really want to watch this movie as well. It sounds pretty good.